There was a time in America when a trucker could outrun a Smoky on the interstate and idle his Peterbilt all night in a truck stop parking lot without anyone batting an eye. Those days are gone. The tricks that kept freight moving through the 70s and 80s are now buried under federal regulations, roadside cameras, and electronic logging devices. In all but a handful of states, some of them carry fines north of $10,000. Today, we're counting down 15 banned trucker hacks that could end a career in a single roadside inspection. And number one is the move that built the outlaw trucking legend in the first place. But this story doesn't start with fines and regulations. It starts in the golden age of trucking, when a driver's word was his logbook and the CB radio was the law of the land. Between the oil crisis of 1973 and the rise of electronic enforcement in the 2000s, drivers invented an entire underground playbook just to keep the wheels turning and the bills paid. One by one, the government shut those tricks down. Here's every single one of them, what it cost back then and what it costs now. Number 15, the Georgia overdrive. Every old hand knows this one. You crest a long grade in the Appalachians, kick the transmission into neutral, and let gravity do the work while the fuel gauge holds still. Drivers called it the Georgia overdrive, the midnight gear, or the Mexican overdrive, depending on which part of the country you ran. The problem was simple physics. A loaded 80,000-pound rig coasting in neutral has no engine braking at all, and if the service brakes overheat on a 6% grade, that truck becomes a runaway. Today, coasting in neutral is illegal for commercial vehicles in nearly every state, and a driver caught doing it on a downgrade can be cited, written up on his CSA record, and in serious cases put out of service on the spot. The fuel savings were real, maybe a few gallons on a long run through the Smokies. And in 1974, with diesel rationed and lines wrapped around the fuel islands, a few gallons mattered. The risk was never worth it. Ask any old hand about Montego Mountain in Tennessee or the grade coming down into Denver on Interstate 70, and he'll tell you about somebody who rode a dead pedal all the way to the runaway ramp or didn't make it that far. Those sand-filled escape ramps carved into the mountainsides exist because of drivers who learned this lesson the hard way. And the smell of cooked brake shoes drifting down a grade is something you never forget once you've smelled it. Number 14, linear amplifiers on the CB radio. The FCC limits a CB to 4 watts of output. That was never enough for drivers who wanted to talk from Amarillo to Oklahoma City. So an underground market of linear amplifiers, better known as boots or foot warmers, exploded in the late 70s. A good boot could push a signal into the hundreds of watts, stepping all over every other channel for 50 miles. The FCC banned them outright, and they didn't play around with enforcement. Getting caught with an illegal amplifier wired into your radio can bring federal fines that climb past $10,000, plus confiscation of the equipment. Old-timers will tell you half the fun of Channel 19 died when the boots got cracked down on. The FCC would disagree, but the radio was never the biggest secret in the cab. That one was sitting right on the dash. Number 13, radar detectors. Four-wheelers can still run a radar detector in most states, but commercial drivers lost that privilege in 1994 when the federal government banned them in all commercial vehicles nationwide. Before the ban, a fuzzbuster on the dash was as standard as a coffee thermos, and a driver on a tight delivery window could shave hours off a coast-to-coast run knowing where the bears were sitting. Then the studies came out linking detector use to speeding crashes in heavy trucks, and Washington dropped the hammer on the whole industry at once. Today, if a DOT officer spots a detector during an inspection, even one that's unplugged and sitting in the glove box of the cab, the driver gets a violation, the carrier takes a hit on its safety score, and the fine stacks on top of whatever speed the driver was actually running. The little black box that once saved careers now ends them. Number 12, the second logbook. Before electronic logging, drivers ran on paper, and paper is patient. The trick was to keep 2 logbooks. One showed a clean, legal day for the scale house. The other one, if it existed at all, tracked reality. Drivers called the official one a comic book because that's about how much truth was in it. A driver could legally run 10 hours and actually run 20, penciling in a graceful 8 hours of sleeper berth time that never happened, while the real miles piled up between Chicago and Laredo. Some of the old hands kept their comic book filled out in advance like a novelist working ahead of deadline, and truck stop counters sold logbooks by the stack because everybody knew a driver might go through a few. The whole system ran on the honest fiction that a man could make his delivery appointments and his legal hours at the same time, when everyone from the dispatcher to the dock foreman knew he couldn't. Federal enforcement caught on decades ago, and falsifying a record of duty status became one of the most heavily penalized violations in the industry. Fines for falsification can run into the thousands per offense, and a pattern of it can put a driver's CDL and a carrier's operating authority in the crosshairs. The comic book era officially died in December of 2017, which brings us to what replaced it. Number 11, ELD tampering. When electronic logging devices became mandatory, the old paper tricks were supposed to be finished. Instead, the game just moved into the computer. Some drivers figured out how to log driving time under a ghost co-driver who didn't exist. Others unplugged the device and blamed a malfunction or ran the truck under an unassigned driving profile. The feds treat all of it the same way they treated the comic books, except now the penalties have teeth. Tampering with an ELD is a falsification violation that can cost thousands of dollars per incident, put the driver out of service for 10 hours minimum, and flag the entire carrier for a compliance review. And unlike paper, the electronic trail never forgets. The truck's engine control module records everything, whether the logging device is plugged in or not. Number 10. Straight pipes and Jake brakes in banned zones. There is no sound on earth like a Detroit diesel coming down a mountain grade with the engine brake wide open. To a trucker, that's music. To a town at 2 in the morning, it's a war crime. Hundreds of municipalities across the country posted those famous signs reading no engine brakes, and plenty of drivers treated them as suggestions, especially the outlaws running straight pipes with no muffler at all. Those local ordinances now carry real fines, often several $100s a pop, and a truck running without proper muffler equipment can fail a roadside inspection entirely. In noise-sensitive corridors in states like Colorado and New York, repeat offenders have faced fines stacking well into the thousands. The Jake itself was never the crime. The straight pipe was. Number 9. Red dye diesel. This one is the granddaddy of expensive mistakes. Off-road diesel is dyed red because it's sold without highway fuel taxes, meant for farm tractors, generators, and reefer units. The old trick was simple. Fill the tractor's fuel tanks from the farm tank or the reefer pump and pocket the tax difference. The IRS considers that tax evasion, and the penalty structure is brutal. Getting caught with dyed fuel in your running tanks brings a penalty of $10 per gallon or $1,000, whichever is greater, and that's per violation, per tank. On a truck carrying 300 gallons, do the math. Inspectors at the scales carry dip tubes and check tanks at random, and the dye shows up in trace amounts long after the tank's been run dry. One cheap fill-up can cost more than the truck payment for the whole year. Number 8. The splash and dash. Fuel taxes don't just vary between highway and farm fuel. They vary state by state, and under the International Fuel Tax Agreement, a trucker owes tax based on where the miles were run, not just where the fuel was bought. The old dodge was to run oversized auxiliary tanks, fill everything to the brim in a cheap fuel state like South Carolina, and fudge the mileage records to dodge the difference. Some outfits got creative with unreported tanks hidden behind the cab. IFTA auditors got creative right back. Fuel tax fraud today brings back taxes, penalties, and interest that can bury a small carrier, and deliberate falsification can cross into criminal territory. The states compare fuel receipts against GPS mileage records now. The arithmetic always wins. Number 7. Idling all night for heat. For 50 years, this was just how it worked. A driver shut down at a truck stop outside Cheyenne in January, left the diesel idling all night, and slept warm in the bunk while the engine burned about a gallon an hour. Nobody thought twice. That low rumble of 100 diesels idling through the night was the sound of a truck stop, as much a part of the place as the smell of the griddle in the morning. Then the anti-idling laws arrived. Today, more than half the states plus hundreds of cities restrict commercial idling, most of them to 5 minutes or less. California enforces it hard. New Jersey fines can reach into 5 figures for repeat offenders, and in New York City, an idling truck can get reported by any citizen with a phone camera, and that citizen collects a cut of the fine for turning the driver in. So, drivers got squeezed from both ends. Shut the engine down and freeze in the bunk at 10 below, or keep it running and pay. PU units solve it for the big fleets, but those cost upwards of $10,000 installed, which is a hard number for an owner-operator watching every dime. That's actually why a lot of drivers I've talked with keep a thermal bivvy stashed in the side box or the bunk now, and the one that keeps coming up is called TerraShell. It's a compact emergency sleeping bag with an aluminized lining that reflects your own body heat back at you, so the cab stays livable even with the engine off in freezing weather. It packs down smaller than a soda can, there's no fuel and no batteries, you just unfold it and climb in. Costs less than one idling ticket, which is probably why so many drivers and their wives are putting one in the truck. If you want to look at it, the link is in the description below. Now, the anti-idling crackdown was really just one piece of a much bigger emissions war, and that war produced the single most expensive banned modification on this entire list. Number 6. Emissions deletes. When diesel particulate filters and EGR systems showed up on new trucks, they choked power, clogged constantly, and stranded drivers with regen cycles on the side of the interstate. So a cottage industry of delete shops appeared, gutting the DPF, straight piping the exhaust, and reflashing the computer. The truck ran stronger and cheaper. It was also a federal violation under the Clean Air Act. The EPA has hammered delete shops with multi-million-dollar settlements, and an owner-operator caught with a deleted truck can face penalties reaching tens of thousands of dollars per vehicle, plus the cost of putting all the equipment back. California takes it further and can pull a deleted truck off the road entirely. Of everything on this list, the delete is the one that turns a working man's truck into a lawn ornament fastest. Number 5. License plate flippers and toll dodging. When toll roads went cashless and camera-based, some drivers found gadgets straight out of a spy movie. Motorized plate flippers that rotate the plate away from the camera at the push of a button, spray coatings that blur the photo, plastic covers angled to beat the flash. Every one of them is illegal, and states with big toll systems have turned enforcement into a revenue stream of its own. New York and New Jersey run dedicated task forces on the bridges, and getting caught with an obscured or flipping plate brings fines in the thousands, plus every dodged toll billed back with penalties. One driver on the George Washington Bridge learned that a $500 gadget can generate a bill with 5 digits on it. Gadgets got plenty of drivers in trouble, but the oldest Dodge still left on this list never needed a gadget at all. Just a CB, a good memory, and nerve. Number 4. Dodging the chicken coops. Weigh stations, the coops, have been the trucker's natural enemy since the beginning. When a driver was heavy, tired, or had paperwork he didn't want examined, the CB lit up with directions to the back way around, and any driver coming the other direction would happily report whether the coop was open or closed. Every scale in America had a bypass route, some little farm road that added 20 minutes and skipped the whole conversation. And the veterans had them memorized from Barstow to Baltimore without ever opening a map. There was a whole etiquette to it. You passed the word on Channel 19, you returned the favor when somebody passed it to you, and the scale masters knew perfectly well what was happening on the roads they couldn't see. States answered with portable scales, chase units posted on those exact back roads, and signage making it a citable offense for a commercial vehicle to blow past an open scale. Getting caught on the Dodge route today means the fine for evading the station, plus whatever the driver was hiding in the first place, and inspectors treat a scale dodger as someone worth tearing the whole truck apart over. The back way around got shorter every year. Now it mostly leads straight to a portable scale. Number 3. Speed governor tampering. Most fleet trucks are electronically governed, often at 65 or 68 miles an hour. For a driver paid by the mile, that governor is money leaking out the stacks, and reprogramming the engine computer to unlock the top end became a quiet specialty at certain shops. The trouble is the trail. That ECM logs everything, and after any serious accident, investigators pull it. A truck governed on paper at 65 that shows 78 in the crash data becomes a lawyer's dream and a carrier's nightmare. with liability that can run into the millions. On the enforcement side, tampering can void warranties, trigger federal scrutiny, and cost the driver his job the moment the telematics report lands on a safety manager's desk. The extra 10 miles an hour was never free. It was just billed later. Number 2. Radar and laser jammers. A detector just listens. A jammer talks back, actively scrambling the signal from a police radar or LiDAR gun. And that difference is everything under federal law. Radar jammers violate FCC regulations on interfering with authorized radio transmissions with penalties that can reach tens of thousands of dollars, and a handful of states treat laser jammers just as harshly. For a commercial driver, it's a career ender stacked on top of the federal exposure, because it proves intent in a way no detector ever could. A few outlaw drivers ran them anyway in the 90s, convinced they were invisible. Modern police LiDAR flags jamming attempts automatically. The gun literally tells the officer he's being jammed, and at that point, the traffic stop becomes a very different conversation. And that brings us to number 1, the trick that made outlaw trucking a legend: running heavy on the back roads at night. In the golden era, when a load paid by the ton and the bridge laws were enforced by a handful of scattered scales, drivers hauled grain, steel, and logs at weights that would make a modern DOT officer faint. The play was simple: load past legal, wait for dark, and run the county roads where no scale ever opened. Grain haulers in Kansas, log trucks in Oregon, coal buckets in West Virginia, whole regional economies quietly ran on it, and the local sheriff often had better things to do than weigh a neighbor's truck at midnight. This was the world Smokey and the Bandit turned into a box office legend in 1977, and the movie barely exaggerated. Drivers wore the outlaw label with a certain pride, because the load paid the mortgage and the risk was mostly a conversation with a judge who'd known your family for 30 years. Today, that same run is a minefield. Overweight fines in many states scale by the pound, so a rig running 15 or 20,000 over gross can generate a single ticket well past $10,000. And states like New York and Pennsylvania have handed out overweight citations bigger than the truck was worth. Add portable scales, bridge sensors, and license plate readers on the back roads themselves, and the midnight heavy run is finished. It survives only in the stories, which is probably where it always belonged. Look at that list as a whole and a pattern jumps out. Every one of those tricks existed because the job squeezed drivers between impossible schedules, thin pay, and thermometers that didn't care about either. The regulations won, and honestly, the highways are safer for most of it. But the men who ran those years, who hand-wrote their logs by dome light and knew every scale dodge from Bakersfield to Bangor, built the country doing it. If you drove in that era, tell us in the comments which one of these you saw with your own eyes and which ones we missed, because there are at least 15 more where these came from. If these stories take you back, hit subscribe, because next time we're covering the truck stops of the 1970s that no longer exist. The ones with the full-service diners and the showers that cost a quarter. Keep the shiny side up.